Black and White is back together.
Wait,
Yes, baby.
it's been so long. Ethan is finally back.
I'm so friggin' excited, man. I have missed doing this with you. One of my favorite shows and most enjoyable companions. I can't believe I went this long without doing it. And I got to say, I really missed it. I miss our time together and our back and forthness.
Yeah. I mean, and listen, hold on. I have to say, big thank you to Kendra for stepping in. She had a great time. She was outstanding. But you know,
I just lost you.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
Oh.
It literally went totally blank right when you said that.
I simply just said that I missed you, and I'm so glad to have you back here. How have you been? Is what I asked.
You know, today's going to be a fun show. I've been good. You know, I had a few really, really stressful weeks there. Yeah. But I'm good. I'm glad we're getting this show back together. The show back together as it was originally intended. I missed it very much.
Did you have withdrawals?
I did. I had Rickianity withdrawals.
For those of you that are watching and don't know what Rickianity is, don't worry about it. No need to explain. However, yeah, man, you know, when you have stressful weeks like that, it definitely is some time to take a step back. So glad you're back, brother.
Me too.
So glad you're back.
Ready to continue doing this each and every week because, oh wait, I forgot. Have you been saying our tagline at the end of the show?
I sure have. Absolutely, yes. I have. We'll get to that later before the show's over. We save it for the end. Hey, listen, for all of you that are watching, thank you so much for tuning in. It's another episode of In Black and White. I am your host, Rick Lockhart II.
And I am your co-host, Ethan Micheal, the first?
The first, sure.
The first, Ethan Micheal.
The inaugural. And welcome to our new time on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time. Better time for both of us because, as I mentioned on our last show, I finally got a job. Whew. So
it's about time, Rick.
It is about time. It is. So bear with us as we work around our schedules, or at least my schedule for the upcoming few weeks. But our new time here, Wednesdays, 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hopefully we'll catch everyone on their drive home from work. Although, granted, many people probably don't have a drive now since they are working from home.
There's that, and you probably shouldn't be watching this and driving. Please drive safely if you are driving home and listening. Just listen.
Yes. Please don't comment. Did I tell you that I had a COVID scare?
No.
Yes, dude. Someone I hung out with, we were like in the same vicinity, got it and messaged me the next day and let me know that they have it. And go figure, they were a Trump supporter.
Wait, that's funny for so many reasons. Wow. Well, I mean, figures. No. So, have you gotten tested yet for it?
Oh yes, I got tested, and I have a clean bill of health. Although, you know, just to be safe, I am going to be sitting at home, for the next, I think,
14 days.
Well, not that many days at this point. I think it's like 6 days or 7 days at this point.
Yeah. Well, you made it through the first week.
Yeah. I made it through the first week. I'm good. I'm excited. I don't feel like crap, so that's a plus. So I don't think the COVID got me. I'm pretty sure I'm safe.
Hey, listen, let me tell you, man, it's nothing to play with. You know, I've seen it. It's hit a few people in my household. It's horrendous. So yes. I'm glad you're okay.
I had a friend on Facebook who had it horribly. She was in the hospital for nearly a month with terrible respiratory issues, struggling to breathe, and a lot of pain. And it's rough. Tragic.
You know, for those of you that are watching that don't believe COVID is real, trust me when I tell you, COVID is real. Wear a mask, wash your hands.
And the test sucks for it. Have you had it done yet, Rick?
So I've not had the test, and here's why I haven't had the test. Although I'm working with the general public now, so I feel like I should just to be on the safe side.
I would.
When we went through COVID, I didn't have any symptoms, So I wasn't able to get tested. This was back in late March.
Okay.
You only could get tested if you had symptoms back then. After having gone through the experience with the people in my household who had COVID, I was supposed to assume I was asymptomatic.
Right.
So now that we're at the point that we're at, I feel like if I go get tested, I mean, I've already been through it. So at this point, maybe I just have antibodies. So I think I'll do the antibody test.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I hope. I guess I hope you've had it. Is that right? Should I hope?
Wow. I don't know if that's the best way to say that.
I hope you have had it, so you have the antibodies, but never gave it to anybody. How about
that? That's perfect. Well, the duration of time that I would have had it, I was quarantined in the house, man. We didn't go anywhere for like a month and a half. So we were.
You were smart and responsible about it.
Yeah.
It's a new world out there, Rick. Every time I go out, I'm just still looking around like, is this a movie or is this real life? Like, imagine a year ago telling people that they were going to have to wear a mask around. Nobody would have believed that.
Or that you can't go to the clubs and actually do what you do in clubs.
Right.
Although there are some clubs out there, and I'm not going to put any clubs on blast. I'm not going to put them on blast, but I'm going to say there are some places out there that still don't believe that COVID-19 is real and are not really adhering to the city regulations or the CDC regulations and guidelines for gatherings. And they're just allowing a free-for-all in their clubs. I was baffled when I saw it, but that's neither here nor there. I'm glad you're okay.
Me too. But you know what? We've gotten off topic, or we haven't even started our topic. We're not here to talk about COVID.
We're not
here to talk about gaslighting racism.
Well, the nuances of racism today. We've spoken about gaslighting racism enough, and if you haven't seen an example of gaslighting racism, tune in to just another episode of 46-1, aka Trump, aka POTUS. And listen to his discussion about racism, the existence of racism. There you go. You're welcome. But tonight we will be discussing with a good friend of mine some of the nuances of racism in systemic racism in a few different areas. Tonight we'll be covering the Second Amendment and what gun laws kind of look like the difference between black and white. There will be some discussions about maybe gaslighting racism that'll come up, possibly. We'll see, but it's an organic conversation. We invite you to join with us in this conversation. Check us out if you are viewing on Facebook. Head on over to YouTube and join in the live discussion and comments. We want all of you to join in on YouTube because
it really helps us.
It helps us, absolutely.
It'll help us get to YouTube monetization much faster,
which we all really want to take place.
Yes,
also,
absolutely.
We do have some Patreons to thank too, don't we?
Yes, we do. We usually thank them at the end of the show. I don't have my Patreon sheet up.
No worries. We'll thank them at the end of the show. But if you are contributing as a patron, thank you. He's going to pull those names up because he keeps records of all that.
4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Marsha Ortega, Cynthia McDonald, and BestName Ever.
Those wonderful patrons. And the links, if you want to become a patron, is also in the show description. Thanks for tuning in to YFNA News. Make sure that you are liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the alarm button so that you can get alerts for when the content goes live.
And real quick, BestName, we did mention it earlier in the show. We're going to be doing this new time slot every Wednesday at 5 p.m. It works better for both of us. So
because I had to go to work.
You finally got a job, which I'm very happy for you.
And this new job, Ethan, I'm going to be Dyson Fit. You know what I mean? So maybe we can work on that karate thing that you instruct, because I'll be losing this COVID quarantine weight. Okay, it's got to go.
Rick, I'm a little insulted here. Karate, Muay Thai.
I thought it was karate. You do Muay Thai. No, I'm so sorry. My apologies. I don't know why I thought it was karate. Muay Thai.
Karate.
It's completely different. It's
very different.
It's so different.
I spent years in Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is
I want to do Jiu-Jitsu.
So much fun. It's a lot of fun, and I'm teaching my little nephew it. And now he's like, I'll wake up, and he's like putting me in a chokehold and an arm bar. Like this little shit will he's like this big. He's like got his literally got my arm in a full bar, legs wrapped around my throat. He's done triangle chokes on me, and it's like the cutest thing. This little dude is doing it, man.
Oh, he idolizes his uncle. That's awesome, dude. Well, I think I'll just need it for not only the looks, but in this society that we live in, where racism is running rampant, maybe I could use it for self-protection as well as the fun that it does bring. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and bring on our guest tonight, who will be joining us in our conversation. A good friend of mine, my buddy Angelo, is joining us for the Nuances of Racism. Angelo, what's going on, sir? How are you?
Well, I'm doing well, gentlemen. Thank you for having me on.
No, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. Big shout out to Angelo for joining us, and condolences, Angelo, for your loss. I know it's a difficult time to have the things going on that you got going on, so we really appreciate you taking the time out to join us on the show tonight.
And Rick said you've been. Oh, did he freeze? Did we just lose Angelo?
I just want to put it out there. My camera's for the first time. I'm not freezing.
But I've been freezing, and now Angelo's freezing.
No, is it?
Angelo's back. He's back.
There we go.
I'm here. You guys froze. That wasn't me.
Oh, got it. Listen, it's technology, guys. Bear with us. We're not in a professional studio yet, but keep watching on YouTube. Like and subscribing. We'll be there.
Anyway, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for the condolences, and it means a lot coming from you. Obviously, you and I have a history together, so just thank you. I appreciate it.
It's absolutely, man. I can't imagine, but I'm glad you're able to kind of step away from that a little bit and engage in the conversations that we've been having online. Yeah. So social media, as we all know, has blown up with conversations about racism, systemic racism. And social media, unfortunately, can bring out really the worst in people, actually. So I've seen with comments going back and forth. So Angelo reached out and wanted to come on the show and really engage in these conversations as we do on In Black and White virtually, so that we could have the conversations in public and maybe provide some clarity for people that are reading comments on social media and not engaging. So let's wow, there's so much to get started with. And I say this every time I start the show. I notice that when I go back and watch it, I always start with, there's so much to cover. Because there's just always so much to cover.
There is. It's a never-ending topic. Yeah. And I do have a question from an audience member, but we're going to actually save that for the end of the show. I shouldn't say audience member. I should say someone that's occasionally watched us, but I'm going to save that for towards the end.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a good one. So, Angelo, you and I, we've talked a bit about, and Ethan, I'm sure you probably have seen some posts about when we talk about the differences or systemic racism between Black and white, Black Americans and white Americans, there seems to be a difference, potentially a difference in opinion about what Black militias are looking like. And, I've said for time and time again, I've posted it before, if you want to change gun laws in America, arm Black people. Start.
Very good point.
Start having Black militias come to the forefront, and it's taking place now, right? So, Angelo, I know that you had some thoughts about, and you're a proponent of the Second Amendment, right?
Yeah.
You and I have had some conversation about it. Let's start there. So let's talk about your perception of the Second Amendment and the differences between Black Americans, white Americans, and gun ownership, gun culture, if you will.
Sure. All right. Well, it's important first to start with what the two-way is and what was the intention of the forefathers when they wrote this right into our Bill of Rights, right? And this is substantiated with the Federalist Papers. So I'm just going to dictate essentially what was said in the Federalist Papers and what that means. Okay. Our right to bear arms is our right to bear arms against a tyrannical government. That is the reason why it's there. There's people that try to debate this fact and try to stipulate that isn't the reason, that it's more about self-defense of your own home, as far as like an intruder or what have you. Although that comes along with it, that's not its main intention. And this is substantiated many, many times over. It is our right as citizens to protect ourselves against tyrannical government. So let's just start there. Okay. As far as black militias, as you just mentioned, I will state it again. That is your right. It is our right. It is your right to form a militia. Now, where it gets a little bit sticky is actually how they essentially, or where I should say, where they put the commas in the Second Amendment. It doesn't exactly flow. It's a bit ambiguous as far as where those commas lie in that sentence and what they mean, and that's obviously the reason why we have such a debate over this particular right that we have.
Well, I not to interrupt real quick, but just off the top of my head, I think that most people who are debating this don't even read the Second Amendment. Like, let's just put that out there.
Well, that's a problem. That's a problem. Yeah.
But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But well, actually,
yeah. Well, let's just start there. Like, I hate to say this, as you mentioned it before, that there are obviously a lot of anonymous people on social media that just sound off, and a lot of the time, they couldn't recite to you even the first sentence of, and it's actually only one sentence, but the first portion of the Second Amendment. And then they try and make a point, if you will, or substantiate their claims and viewpoint off of, well, they don't even have the proper information. So that's sad. Unfortunately, I wish that all of us, all citizens, regardless, at the very least, knew the first 3, 4 that are very, very important to our rights as people in this country. Why more people don't know this is sad, to be honest, because it really is the cornerstone. Bill of Rights is the cornerstone of our democracy, of our constitutional republic, of how and why we were formed as a nation. And we're seeing it 250 odd years later. We're still seeing it right here, right now, with this particular topic that you brought up.
Go ahead.
So I have a question. You said you're a proponent of the Second Amendment, correct?
I support our Bill of Rights, but yes, specifically the 2A is one of the topics that I tend to focus on.
Okay. So do you think if its main objective is to be, for example, protect us from a tyrannical government, do you think we're still in danger of that? Like, I could see why it was useful in that time period, but do you still think we necessarily need it today if that is its only objective?
Yes. For one word answer, it's yes. I mean, I can obviously get into that if you want.
Yeah, just because I guess I find, and I don't want to misrepresent you. I've just found that many people with that belief have this big fear that the military or police are going to take over. And in my opinion, they often forget that the military and police are made up of us. Like, they're not going to follow those orders and turn on their own American people, in my opinion. So therefore, I find it to be unnecessary. But please go ahead.
Sure. Let's see, where do I want to start with this? Just to quickly answer that last portion of what you said there. Yes, the military is made up of, well, you and I, right? Our fellow citizens in this country. And we would like to hope that when push came to shove in such a scenario, that our military would not raise arms against its own people, right? That's the hope, right? Well,
haven't we just seen that? I'm pretty sure we've just seen that.
Well, I'm sorry, what?
The military taking up arms against its own citizens, right? Haven't we been witnessing that?
You could, yeah, we could go on that. Yes, to put brief, yes, to just say yes. We can go into that nuance if you want to, but I'm an advocate of studying history. I'm a student of history. There's no two ways about this. During the last 6 months that I've had nothing but we all have nothing but all this time on my hands. I chose to occupy my time by starting with the creation of the Roman Empire. And I literally
went back pretty far.
Yeah, I watched roughly 50, maybe 60 hours worth of tutorials of history professors from Yale, history professors from UCLA, so on and so forth. And I started there and I said, you know what? Let me relearn history. Basically what we learned in high school, right, Rick? Right. Okay. Rick and I went essentially to, well, at least 1 year. I went to 1 year of St. Joseph's.
Shout out to the Catholic schools.
Yeah, I was a bad little boy. I was a good student. I was a bad little boy, though. I got
well, look at us now.
I got asked to leave for reasons, but anyway, I digress. And just
Uh-oh.
No.
Uh-oh. Oh. See, again, it's not mine. I feel like I'm in a better place in my life right now.
Yeah,
Okay.
He's
back.
Yes.
All right. So I'll be a little bit more concise here. Basically, I watched the creation of civilization, if you will, from that point forward. Okay, how Europe was formed. Okay, the colonization of Africa. You name it. I mean, all the way through. Okay, one thing that is truly consistent within our history is that it repeats itself. Okay, we have plenty of examples. I'm not even. I mean, I could cite three off the top of my head if you want. There's endless examples of a government speaking with all its good intentions and benefits to its people turned on it at one point in time in its history. So I think it's foolish of us, and I think it's, and dare I say, well, I don't want to sound insulting, a bit naive for some to believe that it's not possible that somehow in America that we've evolved past this little attribute of the human condition where absolute power corrupts absolutely. I beg to differ. I believe that is still within us as a human, as a species, excuse me, and that we have to be vigilant at all times. Not always aggressively vigilant. Sometimes passively vigilant, as far as what that means and what we need to do, and be aware of these things as citizens.
So, when you're referring to the human condition, or what do you think? Could you explain that?
Sure. Well, it's. I don't know if you guys have ever dived into evolutionary biology. There's actually and this will tie into the whole racial aspect, Rick. Have you ever heard of the story at Evergreen State with Professor Weinstein? No? Okay. All right. No. We'll shelf that for a second. The human condition, the aspect of human condition known as self-interest. It is something that is ingrained in our evolution. And now this isn't me speaking. This is a professor of evolutionary biology at Evergreen State, or was at Evergreen State, and other evolutionary biologists. There are certain things about us that, regardless of the fact that we are a social species, which we are, at the end of the day, my survival is always paramount. Okay. And my interest will always be paramount. Even for people that I love, I will protect them as best I can, but it is ingrained within our evolution to, at all costs, protect our own life. That does come first. I think it's fair to say, and there's evidence to this effect. So what I mean by that is, we cannot underestimate someone that finds himself in a position of power, or a group of people, small group of people in a position of power, that they will seek out their own self-interest, that they will seek to control others for their own benefit. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Ethan, is that?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. So that is the main concern. I mean, that is always the main concern. It always should be the main concern. And it's why our founding fathers and writers of the Constitution emphasized a small government, emphasized that the office of the presidency should not be so significant, that the president is not a king, that the powers imbued to the office of the presidency should be limited and checked, and for good reason. And this is the reason.
So here we are, and thank you for sharing that all of that information. You and I spoke about the Milford Act, right? And we can get into that here in just a second.
Thank you. Yeah, bring it up. Good.
With when we talk about how gun laws became regulated, right? It was because of the Black Panther Party. And here we are yet again facing a system or in a system, as you say, history repeating itself. Here we are yet again in a system where you have Black Americans who are looking to arm themselves from systemic racism, right? We're looking at a government that is not protecting its Black American citizens. So you have groups, these militia groups, that now feel it's time to take up arms to protect, their own, to protect our own. And I use there only because I don't have a gun yet, but I'm going to get my gun license at one point in my life. I am going to get that Ford card. I need that. So, but I'm not a gun owner, so I have to say they for that reason. But you have them protecting, the culture of Black Americans because we don't have the support of our government. But here we are. People have a different stance when it comes to these militia groups because they're Black with bearing arms, right? So we walk into the 1968, the Milford Act, and all its amendments. And I know that you had a chance to take a look at that too. Feel free to take us there for a second.
So the Mulford Act, 67, just so you know, 1967, when Ronald Reagan, pardon?
No, go ahead.
67. Ronald Reagan was the governor of California at the time. Okay. The Black Panther Party formulated, if my memory serves me correct, somewhere around 1963. Well, they decided that for the reasons actually you just stated, that they needed to protect their own people in their own neighborhood because they weren't receiving that protection, if you will, from the local police department, and that they actually were being harassed by the local police department for, in fact, carrying weapons and so on and so forth, where they actually at one point they showed up to the state capitol completely armed. I mean, shotguns and rifles. There's pictures of this. So at the time, the governing bodies in California, you know, the House and the Senate, the state Senate in California at the time, decided to draft a bill called the Mulford Act, and essentially created the second most significant gun control law in the land at the time, right? The other one being, I believe it was 1933, which had to deal with the Thompson gun and sawed-off shotguns. Basically stating that you can no longer open carry in the state of California. And it was completely driven by the fact that the Black Panther Party decided to take up arms. And it was wrong then. That is an unconstitutional law then. It is still now. It is still on the books. In fact, it's the reason why you can't open carry in California, period, for anybody. And that's a problem.
States that came along with it. But I do think that, you know, when we look at gun culture in America, right, and this goes for anyone that's walking around with a semi-automatic weapon, you know, is that the weapon of choice that's needed for defense or protection? That's only my question. It's more so hypothetical than it is an actual question. But you look at what happens when you have people who are irresponsible gun owners, right? You look at the situation with Kyle Rittenhouse, who ended up as a 17-year-old walking around a group of rioters and protesters, and ends up killing two and injuring another, right? You know, and if you were to, again, and I think, Angela, you and I talked about this, and this has really been the setting for this. You look at Kyle Rittenhouse walking around with this AR-15 in the streets. I can't remember if Wisconsin's open carry or not. However, he's walking around with this AR-15 and nothing happens to him. We have militia groups that walk around, and even if there were if it were a black man walking around with an AR-15, the response would have been different. And when you look at the two systems, the two systems of justice, when you look at the system of white supremacy in our country, here's where the setup is. White Americans are free to hold on to that bearing arms with no regard, no second look, right? No double take, nothing. But for our Black American citizens, it's police have to get involved, right? They're looked at differently. They're not even looked at as American citizens. How do we get around that, right? You know what I mean? Like, what is it going to take for that to actually change that perception?
Well, two things. Actually, three things. One, again, I'll just reiterate that it is, again, the Second Amendment is all of ours, right? We all have that right. I really advocate for those out there that if you don't particularly have a weapon, take a weapons class, get a concealed carry permit, whatever state you're in, do whatever is legally allowed to do within your state. I do encourage you to do that, and that's everyone. Okay. There are two areas in our society and government, if you will, where I do agree where we do have systemic racism. Okay. And these are the two areas. One of which is the one that we're talking about right now, which you just mentioned. Okay. Yes, unfortunately, there is a discrepancy between reaction of law enforcement with an African-American person with a weapon in their hand in such a situation and someone who isn't. Okay. Now, it is not across the board. I don't like to paint with a broad brush. I can cite several instances where a Caucasian person had a weapon in their hand, and guess what? The worst happened. Okay. And they weren't asked any questions. They were murdered.
Right.
And also those who were unarmed. I brought this up to you before. This situation close to where I live now in Mesa, Arizona, a gentleman named Daniel Shaver. I won't get into that, but just want to throw that out there. Two, the other area where systemic racism absolutely exists is the war on drugs. I'm a huge advocate for removing the war on drugs. It has disproportionately ruined the lives of people of color, removing mainly male figures out of homes and out of neighborhoods for nothing more than carrying an ounce of cannabis or something along those lines. These are non-violent crimes. The sentences that are served because of this are ridiculous. I won't digress too far into that, but those are definitely the two areas where you and I hope anyone else with common sense that is objective can say to themselves, like, listen, wait a minute here. There are two sets of rules, if you will, when it comes to these two particular areas. Where the problem happens, where the disconnect lies when people are on opposing sides of a viewpoint, is that they tend to group in other aspects of our society with this, and that's where the gray area is. That's where the nuance, as you're saying, the nuances of racism, where we have to really look. We have to separate the wheat from the chaff. Okay, we can't lump everything in together. We have to look at certain things from certain aspects and tackle them one at a time, if you will.
So there's a lot there, and I want to jump back to one of the first things you said regarding the Second Amendment. Now, I had my FOID card for most of my life. I am for responsible gun ownership. I am not for the Second Amendment or just anyone over 18 getting guns, because what happens is we end up with a bunch of kids, like people like Kyle Rittenhouse or others, who think guns are the first option. Most people, police officers, military, I'm lumping everybody in here, don't understand the concept of an actual threat versus something that's not a real threat. There should be so many more stipulations, in my opinion, to getting a gun. Better mental health checks, making sure you don't live in a house with anybody who is mentally ill. I think you should be required to go to gun training courses. I also think you should be required to take physical defense self-defense, because again, a gun is not a first option. But the problem in America, in my opinion, is everyone believes they have this birthright to a gun, and thus that is an answer to a problem. And I think we need to stop doing that. I don't feel the solution, is adding more guns into the environment. And if you need proof of that, to me, just go to a bar and see how people act when they're drunk, and tell me you think those people should have easier access to guns. Because I can tell you, I would say, objectively, in my experience, that's the worst thing you can do, because people are assholes and they don't think. They don't want to pin the person down. They immediately get scared and they pull the gun. And I'm sorry, I don't think that is the answer.
Okay, fair enough. Rick, do you want me to continue to respond, or do you want to chime in?
Well, I've heard even say that several times, that people need to take those classes and actually work as a security guard bouncer at a bar before, yeah. Which I think is a great. I actually think that's a really good solution to like gun ownership. Like, take self-defense classes first, because in reality, I mean, you look at crime throughout communities that are underfunded, that have this access to guns, right? You look at communities in Chicago that can easily go over to Indiana and purchase a gun, and our gun crime, our shootings here in Chicago or in Illinois, go up because of lax gun laws in Indiana, and people thinking that the first answer or the first option to a threat is to pull out a pistol, pull out a gun, AR-15 perhaps. Why are there military-style guns on the street anyway, or access to citizens? But I digress. But go ahead, Angelo, your response.
Sure. Okay, so there are two things. One, Ethan, to your point of certain people not having certain weapons in their hands because of whatever, maybe mental illness, what have you. I certainly don't want someone who is clinically mentally ill and diagnosed by psychiatrists and other doctors to have a weapon in their hand. I think we all can agree upon that. Okay. Here's the issue. It is our birthright. It is our right as citizens, from being born in this country, that you do have your Second Amendment right. I understand the tie in there that you're getting at, and I understand that. I understand like the mentality towards it versus literal, but it is literal. That is our right. That is undeniable. But when you say people that get themselves into certain situations where their first reaction is to draw their weapon, right, and that does happen. They preemptively take that action, and it is the wrong action sometimes, depending on the situation. There's no choice about that. I understand. We're a nation of 320 million people. There are countless interactions on any given day. You're gonna have your situations in every. You're gonna have your percentages. Okay.
Of course.
But if I may, since you brought Kyle Rittenhouse, if you scrutinize the video that is available, okay, and I have many times, he wasn't reckless with his using his firearm. There are several instances in the video available where he did use it as his last resort, because you'll notice, especially the second half of the video, where he trips, he falls. A gentleman with a skateboard tries to essentially hit him in the head, hits him in the shoulder with the skateboard. Okay. He turns, he shoots. Okay. That is a threat to his bodily harm. That skateboard can cause bodily harm and or death. He weighed that. He had his weapon on him. He fired it. Now you have, at the very same moment, not even seconds later, you have two more gentlemen that approach the situation. Okay. One tries to grab his rifle. Okay. And tries to hit him. He shoots, he fires. Another person comes to his right, which is he's actually, I read he's actually an EMT, and he's been at several of these protests throughout the country. He has a weapon. He has a 9mm Glock in his hand, and he's raising it as he approaches Kyle. Now, he has stated on the record that he was actually trying to grab Kyle's weapon, and that the gun was out simply as protection. Fair enough. So be it. There's no way to tell that in a moment's notice. There's no way to tell that whatsoever. There is another person immediately to that person's right. Kyle shoots the person with the gun, turns, looks at that person, does not fire his weapon. Why? Because he knew that person was not a threat to him. He stopped himself. He was not just he just was not just spraying his weapon in the air. He wasn't. He was calculated. He addressed the people that were harming him and trying to harm him at that particular time. So I'll use that as just a little bit, because I know you'd mentioned it, right?
So I personally, Rick, don't feel comfortable properly addressing this unless I see the video again. Right.
Yeah, right. I was gonna say, I that part of the video I have not seen. And, I mean, using it as an example, I understand. However, that whole conversation is that could be a show within itself, and we're looking at what has happened in that instance. I don't even know if there's been an update on what's going on there yet either. But
I will say this, to your point earlier, Rick. Had Kyle Rittenhouse been an African-American young man, in my heart of hearts, I want to think that he would not have been treated differently. However, my rational thought and logic leads me to believe that perhaps there would have been a different outcome.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to acknowledge that. Okay. We have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that there is a mentality, there is a prejudice, because that's the word, that's the proper word, when it comes to assessing a particular situation. And shoot, that could be a whole show in itself, as far as where these prejudices come from and why we have them and why police officers have them, right?
That's exactly what we do on In Black and White. We didn't read that up. That's the next show to have you on, Angelo. Hey,
yeah.
Separately, next week, I am actually doing an episode on defunding the police, and I will have an actual police officer on to talk about it. So it's going to be fun as hell. I'm definitely lining up as many questions as possible for that one.
And if I may just add this one more point here to the last tail end of what Kyle had said previously, was there is a comparison. The only other nation that kind of reflects our nation when it comes to gun rights is Switzerland. I don't know if you're aware of what their culture is like when it comes to their gun culture. Excuse me. Literally every citizen over the age of 18 is armed, and with very little restrictions, if you want to call it that, okay, or gun control as far as that.
For Switzerland's rate of gun ownership is still substantially lower than America's.
Smaller company.
That's from February.
We have more even by per capita, but every single citizen is armed there, virtually. So it depends on how you want to look at it.
Well, my question to that would be
4 people.
Pardon?
1 gun per 4 people.
Is the average in Switzerland?
Yes, that's what I'm looking at right now, which is from February 16th, 2018.
My question would be how many black citizens are in Switzerland?
Right. Okay. So, well, in either case, they mirror us closer than any other nation as far as gun laws, or as far as gun rights. Excuse me.
Well, again, our gun laws are what they are as of now until we get more black militia groups. And I promise, if we want gun laws to change, for those of you that are looking for gun laws to change, keep arming black people with guns.
So I'd like to just read you a little.
Yeah, go ahead.
Though pro-gun advocates point to Switzerland as an example of how gun ownership doesn't have to correlate with mass shootings, Switzerland has very different regulations, practices, and policies related to guns in America.
Okay, I actually was just on in the Library of Congress website referencing this and doing comparison. I should have kept it up, but I know what that's being the intention of that. But there is more to it than that. There's actually a full documentary on Netflix you can watch as far as the gun culture in Switzerland. I'll get the name for you after that. But
they probably have university.
Not necessarily that. What it is how they are, or how they raise, or how their culture, treats guns in itself, and the responsibility, which is what you were getting at earlier in your comment, Ethan. That's kind of really what I was talking about. So what is the fundamental difference? Is that the fundamental difference is how they perceive this and what they're essentially taught from a young age as far as what this is. Now, I can speak to that because my cousin lives in Switzerland. My cousin's lived in Switzerland for the last 35 years. My family's from Italy, specifically Sicily, and my mother's first cousin, my first cousin once removed, has lived there and raised a family. So him and I have actually gone back and forth as far as what it's like, the culture there as far as gun rights are concerned. So I have a little bit of a background on that.
Okay, and one more thing. So currently, in the past 15 years, Switzerland gun ownership has gone from 35% to 22%. So it's decreasing significantly.
Interesting. No, I haven't looked up that particular stat.
Cynthia McDonald just had a question, but she retracted it. So I guess she doesn't want to read the question, but it was such a good question. I really wanted to ask it. So I'll ask it of myself then. I'm wondering if they have military style weapons. I think, again, that's really, oh no.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah. My cousin has an AR-15.
I would like to know how many black citizens are in Switzerland running around with guns and what their perception is. They don't have systemic racism that we do. Right, again, they might. So, Angelo, you posted something that we had a conversation about it, and I'll kind of change topics here. You posted something that was taking place at University of Chicago in their English department for PhD students. And the post was in regards, for those of you who are not familiar with this, University of Chicago, well, a lot of the universities have been struggling with deciding if they were going to have a graduate studies or a PhD studies program, I believe, for the 2021 school year. And University of Chicago decided that they would admit PhD students who were interested in Black studies only. Those would be the only students for the PhD program that they would admit. And Angela, when you posted that, it sounded like there was some questions or concerns that you had there with that being an approach. And I'll let you explain that, and then we can kind of discuss that a bit too.
Sure. Well, here we kind of discussed this obviously off camera a little bit. So obviously we have, we're discussing, in a sense, there being double standards, right?
Right.
Obviously with the 2A we were just talking about, and we've acknowledged that that does exist. And if we're going to address double standards, then I mean, this is just the way I think. I'm a critical thinker. I will question any narrative, even my own. In fact, I question mine more than I question anybody else's. So
sounds like he might be a skeptic.
I'll be the judge of that.
Look, I am, and with a dash of cynicism.
I thought I was, I've always thought I was a skeptic, and I'm learning the more skeptics I meet, the more I'm like, shit, I'm not as skeptic as I'd like to be. Like, there's a lot more questions I need to learn to ask.
Listen, we ask, not to digress, but we ask questions to learn. This is how we communicate. This is how we educate ourselves.
Smart people ask questions to learn.
I ask questions, and that old cliche, only never ask a question you don't know the answer to. Hogwash. Okay, I ask a question because I don't know the answer.
Did you really say hogwash?
I knew the answer and be asking.
I have questions. I have questions now. Hogwash? Anyway, so let's get into.
I'm keeping it. Listen, I'm keeping it clean. That was the cleanest. It was the cleanest way I could put that. I mean, there's other ways of putting it. Anyway.
Just so everyone knows, we will get to your questions at the end. Yeah. I've seen some from BestName and a couple others. If you do have questions for Angelo, Rick, or myself, just tag YFNA News so it highlights it for us, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the show. Sorry, Angelo, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, so quickly, it's because a person asks a question does not mean they're questioning you. I always like to point that out.
In some cases.
So if we were to look at this statement that the University of Chicago put out, which actually my cousin's actually a graduate. She went there on a full ride, believe it or not. Very, very smart woman.
It's University of Chicago, sure.
Yeah, U of C. Yeah, the university that we're speaking of. They put out a statement from their English department stating that they are, and I corrected my statement just so I edited it on Facebook, that they are only interested in accepting those that are focused on or working with Black studies, which Black studies is American history. Okay, it is a very big part of our collective history as Americans. So you know what? I encourage anybody to get involved and at least have some modicum of understanding and get interested in that. Okay, so this isn't why I'm saying this. This isn't why I'm questioning that. But as obviously the critical thinker that I am and the creature that I am, I propose the question: if we take out the word Black and interject white, Caucasian, what have you, okay, how would that be viewed by the greater public? How would that be perceived? Is it fair to say that it would be considered racist to have it, cited as such? So I asked myself this question, and I asked it of other people, and Rick gave me his answer earlier, but I want you to give that reply, and then we can go from there.
Right. Well, so a couple of things. First, my answer to you initially was that we're already in a system designed for white studies to be the norm, right? So here we have an opportunity to extend learning about a marginalized community or the marginalization of and the history of, and again, I don't even know what Black studies encompasses. And as I kind of dug a little bit into this, I'll get to that in a second. But initially my answer was just that, right? This is the opportunity to provide a level playing field or equal playing field, if you will, for a community that has been marginalized. That was when I kind of glossed over a few points in the article. However, when I read the article and I found that it was, and I went back and saw that your post had been edited too, Angelo, that it was for Black studies or people that are interested in Black studies. My first question was that, what does Black studies look like? Now, you, Angelo, say that Black history or African-American history is American history. And I wish more people would actually believe that. But unfortunately, what we've been subjected to in our culture is a history that has been whitewashed, right? We don't get the nuances of what Black Americans, what Africans went through as slaves, and what chattel slavery actually was. That's not being discussed in Black history. And essentially what we get are, these, this pedestal of people that we want to look to admire, right? We get all of the Malcolm X's, the Martin Luther Kings and the Rosa Parks stories. We get very little Malcolm X, but a little bit there, right? But there's so much more rich history, and there's so much more specific instances that has taken place that have brought African Americans or Africans to the point of being Black Americans or African Americans where we are modern day, that has been completely demolished, right? Or glossed over and not even recognized. I was watching a documentary on epics called Enslaved, where Samuel L. Jackson was retracing his history to the particular country in Africa that his ancestors are from. But in this documentary, they're covering the slave ships that didn't even make it to America, and the slave ships that were the slaves that were being traded on the black market after slavery was abolished. None of that's being taught, right? So yes, Black history is American history, because you're right, this country was built off of the backs of slaves. However, that's not the case. So here we have an Ivy League school that says, in this time of struggle for equality and equity, we're going to open up. And in a time where we don't have really the means to do this broad opening, we're going to offer this assistance and this support for people who want to explore and understand what Black studies, what Black America, or even African history, like, I don't know what that's going to look like, but ultimately open the door so that we can have more equity in understanding what Black people bring to our culture, our society, our common day life, if you will.
Sure.
So I'm interested to see what Black Studies looks like, right? I want to know. I would, if this opens the door for more Black PhD, recipients? I can't remember the name of the terminology that is called for people who are studying for their PhD.
I believe you're correct.
But if it opens the door for that, then great. Also, if it opens the door for more white Americans to get involved to understand it, then hell yeah, do it. Absolutely, by all means. Because, at the end of the day, what it's going to take is, and I've said this before on this show, it's going to take white Americans having the conversation to demolish systemic racism and white supremacy, right? And what's going to provide a platform for that, what's going to provide an area of opportunity for that, is for white people to really understand the equity within Black lives, right? That's kind of where you, in a sense, if you were to take Black Lives Matter as an organization out and just understand the phrase itself, it's the attempt to find the equity in Black lives. Here you have an Ivy League school that's saying, hey, we're going to do our part for that. We're going to open the doors. We're going to provide Black studies and invite, PhD students with the little means that we have for this school year to come in and have that opportunity.
But Rick, there was a point that you, if you remember, there was a point that you were going to make, and help me out here. We were talking about creating equality, and you were going to respond to that. Do you remember? So you were saying, like, at what point do we consider? At what point, and how do we quantify the playing field has been leveled? In other words,
sure. So how do we quantify that? Is that's nuanced within itself, but ultimately it's just that, like I just mentioned, it's when we are able to find that the equity in Black Americans is equal to white Americans, to Hispanic Americans, to Asian Americans, right? That Black people are at the same level playing field. And unfortunately, when you look at where we are now systemically, right? You can look at a few different things. You can look at pay discrepancies. You can look at exec boards versus or what the diversity in executive boards look like, right? You can look at all of that to say we still don't have the equity in the Black experience, in Black Americans, that we should have, that makes us an equal and level playing field, or gives us an equal level playing field.
Okay, so I mean, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's going to be a little bit more subjective than objective.
Because you can't. Systemic racism is not overt, right? It's
sure.
And this is what makes racism and the conversation about racism very nuanced. It's covert racism. It's the systems that are in place that's not blatant blatantly out saying Black people are not equal, right? They're just systems and structures that are in place that keep Black people at an unlevel playing field. So it's going to be subjective, yes. There are some objective means that you could use, right? Like I mentioned, if you look at the boardroom and you don't have the diversity makeup, I'll use this example. I had a conversation. I won't use any company specific, but I had a conversation with a gentleman who is just under, at the director level, just under the executive board of a major company. And we had the engaging conversation of, and we'll take restaurants in Chicago specifically, this particular concept. I said, look at your executive board, look at your leadership team. What does that make? What is the makeup of your leadership team? And this is across the board in most, you can look at the tech industry, you can look at it in several different fields and see this. Your executive board is typically made up of mostly white men, right? You may have some women and you may have some people of color, but ultimately the dominant characteristic that you're gonna come across consistently is white men. Probably more cisgendered straight white men, but we'll just say white men in general, right? That right there alone gives you an insight, and if you want to use that objectively, to say, if in the event you have a company that you're running that has a myriad of I don't want to say ethnicities. Let's say ethnicities, right? People from different backgrounds.
Diversity.
But your executive board doesn't reflect that, right? Then there's an issue and there's a concern, and it should be addressed, but it's not being addressed. So ultimately, you can have some objectivity, but there's no system in place that's saying, that executive board is keeping Black people out of that boardroom. It's just there are systems that are designed that don't give accessibility to people of color, even to women, or to other marginalized communities. So
it sounds like, Rick, what you're saying is, like, let's say there is a board of 12, cisgender white dudes. You're not saying that just because they're there, they are in any way being racist. You're just saying the system behind it preventing Blacks from having the same opportunities to get on the board is the problem. Is that correct?
Correct. I would say that, it's, I mean, there could be some racism behind that, but ultimately, overall, there are systems that are in place that do keep people of color, specifically Black people, and other marginalized communities out of that area, that boardroom.
Well, at this point, gentlemen, we're going to keep going.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. I don't know. I thought it was like an hour and we're done, so I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yeah, I actually messaged you that, Rick. I was like, "Are we going for an hour or an hour and a half?"
I'll talk all night. I'll keep going.
Well, you know what? We'll make this the last topic briefly. I'll let you respond, Angelo. We'll get to a few questions and then go ahead and wrap it up.
Okay. Well, so maybe we save this part for maybe the next conversation. But there is something to be said about the last few comments that you did, in fact, make as far as the demographic that is representative of CEOs, and of course of executive boards and their correlation within society and the percentages. And stop, use the word stopping. If I don't want to misquote you, stopping, or the system itself is stopping other people from being a part of that. There's definitely things that we can get into with that. I mean, I'd love to talk about my own political thoughts on that, as far as how that can be addressed, and so forth. But that's up to you. I'm not sure if we want to go down that direction, or if we want to talk about something else entirely.
What would have been a good starting question, which I am curious, and you don't have to answer this, Angelo, but I just am curious. If are you voting for Donald Trump?
Am I voting? No.
Well,
really. So here, I mean, put here.
Well, that's it. That's if you can do it within 3 to 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a registered libertarian, both nationally and here in the state of Arizona. Okay. Taking this approach, especially when it comes to government, and also can be applied towards, the economics of the world, is, look, it's based upon merit. If you're the best candidate for that position, you should get that position, and I don't care, as far as the way it should be. Okay. What should happen okay, and this is going to go towards what Rick kind of was touching on just a little bit ago, was the opportunities that are available should be completely transparent in that. In the educational process, right? Because that's where it starts, okay? In order for someone to actually gain their experience, get into the work field, get into some specific discipline within a company, what have you, where does it start? It starts with your education, right? It starts with where you go to school and having access to that information and having access to all the knowledge that is in the world and the best, the professors that are out there that can teach and have teach students how to think, not what to think. That
you
is
did
the
say
most
should, right?
Pardon?
You did say should, right? That was in your should. Okay.
Should. Yes, that's exactly what should happen. And those who have the wherewithal and or not, excuse me, strike that, not the wherewithal, but rather the capability, the capability and the intelligence and the ability to be in any specific university or college. I actually have a whole thought about how you can do college admissions and have it be completely devoid of any racial information whatsoever. Like either
we could put something together for that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all something else. But basically, unfortunately, the tone that is around when people mention meritocracy, there's something around that I think has a negative connotation, if you will, for some. And it really just means, look, if you're the best, then you should have it. And nothing else should matter. Only that you are equipped and you have the knowledge to perform a task, and that you should be the one to do it. And if that person happens to be an Asian woman or an African American man or what have you, none of that matters. What matters is you have the wherewithal to do it. So in 3 or 5 minutes.
How do we ensure? I'm sorry, Rick. I have a follow-up question with this one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That on paper, that sounds like a great idea, but how do we ensure that all the people are given the same opportunity to earn those, merits or education?
Sure. Well, that's actually touches upon what I was saying is there is a way, because obviously we have this abundance of technology at our hands right now. And I've thought about this to some extent. I'm not sure exactly the execution, but the thought itself, the idea itself is more than possible. If there is a blind way, okay, and this actually could apply to what we were talking about earlier about gun control, right? There is a way to have an anonymous application where you don't know the person's name, you don't know their ethnic background. What you have in front of you is a series of tests, if you will, aptitude tests, if you will, and their educational background, right? Are you familiar with Malcolm Gladwell? Either you
Name
guys?
sounds familiar, but no, not offhand, no.
A brilliant mind. He dives well into this. I mean, he's written 2 books on this. He's a New York Times bestseller. I can't really get too far into, but I'm not going to say this was my idea. It wasn't. He gave me the idea. I said, wait a minute, that kind of makes sense. Like, why don't we talk about that? Why don't we get into how that can work? He describes it a lot better than I can. So I'm just going to give you the flip notes. There is a way to do this. There is a way to assess someone's ability without having anything but that.
Well, so I can understand that. I think the unfortunate part about that is when you want to look at something with total anonymity, if you were to look at someone's aptitude, we have we have this proven science that the standardized tests are inefficient in recording the mental capacity or capability, achievements, so on and so forth, or success for certain students. And students learn now, we're discovering in all different types of ways, right? So that the typical classroom setup isn't necessarily the most benefit for students to learn, so on and so forth. However, but to your point, if I were to submit, say, my resume without a name, without even the community that I'm living in, right? Because that might give some things away.
Sure.
Schools potentially could too, right? Unfortunately, if you were to look at, and again, here's where we talk about where some of these, the systemic racism is in some of our systems. The underfundedness or under-resourced school systems that are out there would give away that I grew up or that I might be someone of a background of either, that from that community or
Sure.
So on and so forth. So even then, I don't know if that would provide total anonymity to say, this is someone that we want. And then look at the reputation of certain schools, right? If I went to an HBCU, and I'm proud that I went to an HBCU, but I put that on my resume, the white boardroom is not going to look at me and say, oh, he's a white guy that went to an HBCU. I mean, with my government name, they might, but that's a different story for another time.
To just talk about that for a second. So in Malcolm Gladwell's book, in his lectures, he talks about how it's actually more important for you to. He talks about here the title of this entire segment was "Why You Should Not Go to Harvard." Okay, so that itself should give you should be like, wait a minute, what he said? Not go to Harvard? Why?
Sure,
it's better for you to be tops in your class in the school that you go to, right, than to be the 70th ranked person that went to Harvard. And there is actual data, hard data on the success rates of people that actually A, graduate, and B, get hired in their field and their salaries. So he talks about that. So that kind of addresses a little bit what you were just talking about right there. Look, I'm not saying this would be a perfect way to do it. I'm not, but we're not perfect people. But what we can do is we can make it more difficult, if you will, for anyone to surmise someone's capability based on anything but their ethnic background or where they grew up or what have you. There are different ways. I mean, standard tests. I agree with you. They've shown the ineptitudes in those tests to really gauge someone's intelligence, or rather comprehension and knowledge of any particular topic. But what do? They also ask you to write an essay, right? Right. In almost every college admittance, they ask you to write an essay, which in your own words, why you think you should be going, or why you should be admitted into that particular institution of higher learning. That's another way. So you get an entire grasp, you get an entire idea around someone, because there is no one test that can tell you, this person's intelligence. I mean, there isn't one, nor will there ever be one. How's that?
Well, that's because we unfortunately have biases that are geared into this unfortunate white supremacist society that we still live in. Until we're able to dismantle systemic racism, then we're going to have these biases that infiltrate those methods. But I can appreciate what you're saying. Yes, you're absolutely right. Let's work towards that, right? But I think the basis of that is going to have to be dismantling what we know as systemic racism in this society that we live in. I definitely want to get to some of the questions that have come up.
All right. So, first question coming from BestName. How would you guys define a well-regulated militia? I'm going to defer to you on this one, Angelo.
All right. Well, okay. I will cite right off the bat Federalist Paper number 51 by Alexander Hamilton. He gets into depth as far as what that means. Gentlemen, I don't know if you're aware or not, but Alexander Hamilton was, I mean, I'm not just saying this because obviously, the musical and whatnot, whatever, which is a great musical. Beautiful. Great piece of art.
Yes.
To say that the man was, oh boy, how do I want to put this? To say that this man was intelligent is an understatement. The extent of his vocabulary is astounding. I think I have a modicum of understanding of the English language. I had difficulty reading through it, but it's brilliant. Anyway, a well-regulated militia has been the hottest portion of that. What the heck does that mean, right?
Right.
The word regulated. He gets into it better than I can. I'll just give you a couple of quick things. Being prepared to act at a moment's notice is part of it. Okay. That is definitely part of it. To make sure that the weapons that are needed are accessible. He gets into that. Okay, that's part of being a well-regulated militia. What we also have to talk about is the word militia. It is really not that. You can go into Merriam-Webster and look up the definition of a militia. But again, we have to put ourselves in the context or in our mindset of when they were writing the Constitution and the times and what they were dealing with, right? And how they felt that this could be a benefit to generations to come. It's simply any able-bodied person that has the right to bear arms, has that arm, and is ready to be called upon when needed. That's pretty much what it is. There is not a general in a militia. Okay, it was designed to be a response to an immediate attack, if you will, especially as our country was moving westward into the Midwest and into the Northwest territories. They couldn't. There was a huge debate about whether or not we should even have a standing army in peacetime. So that's the best way I can answer it. You have to read Alexander Hamilton's description of this. I'm not going to do it any justice. The only thing is, to whoever that person asking that, if my memory serves me correct, it's it's paper number 51.
So a well-regulated militia wouldn't be defined as just a bunch of people over the age of 18 having a gun. Is that correct?
I said would or wouldn't. I'm sorry.
Would not. Like a well-regulated militia, in my eyes, I'm picturing a group of well-coordinated people that go through regular training, both self-defense and, learning to shoot. That's to me what a well-regulated militia is.
Sure, people that are, yeah. I mean, I would agree with that. I would. The notion or the portion of well-regulated, what would come along with that, right? We're taking a militia. Well, we're going to add well-regulated. What does that mean? Perhaps they gather. Perhaps they meet monthly. They discuss firearm safety, things of that nature. Again, the reason why we run into so many problems right now and historically is because we don't necessarily know, at least in the Constitution, okay, what that means and what it means. And the only reference that we have, the only real context we have are other documentation of the time period. Obviously, again, I'll cite the Federalist Papers between Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison that discuss in depth, and it is in depth. I mean, you have to sit there and take sentence by sentence. I kid you not, to really absorb and comprehend what they're trying to say.
All right. Next question. So, if the whole purpose for the Second Amendment is to protect ourselves against a tyrannical government, why do the most vocal of the Second Amendment supporters back the suppression of the First Amendment by police and government militia?
Okay, let me read that.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Can you keep that? Let me read that one more time.
Yeah, I don't know if I understand why do most vocal of this two-way supporters back the suppression of the First Amendment by police and government militia? Are they saying that the suppression of?
Oh, okay. I think I get it. Get it.
Do you want to? I don't really. I'm not certain on that one.
I'm a little lost on that because I'm not understanding the last part of that. If it's what they mean by the First Amendment rights of, are they speaking of police officers and government militia, or like I'm a little lost there.
Yeah, it's a little ambiguous. I guess I'll answer the best way that I think the question's being asked.
Okay.
I think they're talking about protesters and police showing up at protests to essentially quell their First Amendment right with a weapon.
That could be it.
And that people that are the biggest proponents of the two-way support that.
Okay. I see what you're saying there. Okay. Gotcha.
Right. Well, here. Okay. So you can't. Here, look. Here's the way I like to put it. People ask this question: either you take them all, or you take none of them. You don't get to cherry pick the Bill of Rights, right? Either you're gonna be adamant about supporting all of them, or you're gonna be adamant about supporting none of them, because they are rights and they are all equal in that sense. Okay. But here's what I will say: when you have people that are protesting, and a protest turns violent, and unfortunately, it has happened many times in recent months where a protest goes from protest to riot. Okay. Something happens, something sparks off violence, and it just erupts from there. What the police officers are there to do, at least what they're supposed to be there to do, is to make sure that, they're there to protect and serve both person and property. So, I mean, I know it may seem that they're trying to quell your First Amendment right, but in the First Amendment, it specifically states peaceful protest. Okay? Throwing objects, setting fires, what have you, I think we can agree is no longer peaceful, right? You've gone from peaceful to not peaceful at that point. You have shown aggression and you have started violence as far as that's concerned. So, I mean, I guess that's what they're getting at, but I wish I could answer that better because it's just perhaps that person, if they want to write the question a little more clear, maybe answer it better. I don't know.
All right, I want to get to this just comment from BestName. I feel that the Constitution is held in too high regard. Constitution can be altered, amended whenever and wherever it is lacking. It has been before. It can be again. Absolutely. I agree with that.
I agree with that. It can be amended and changed. Yes, because we have a system for that, but it should be held in high regard. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, these are our rights. Like they should be held in the absolute highest regard. This is how we've been able to sustain, at least to this point, a civilized society, how we've been able to build our lives, why this country exists, and other countries too, obviously.
I have to agree with you.
I can't stress it enough.
The Constitution should be held to a high regard. The unfortunate part about that is it's not held equally.
Okay, right, which is what we're talking about, right?
Right.
Yeah. And how that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Trying to find Cynthia's question, but I can't find it to put it on the screen. But it was, are you for universal background checks?
For universal background checks. Okay, so here's the here's the interesting paradox. Okay, so we have the Second Amendment in order to defend ourselves against tyrannical government, right? Okay, so we have that. Now you have government wanting to do a universal background check on its citizens that are applying for weaponry. There's a problem there. There's a problem. They're trying to regulate the very thing that we are to have to the very thing that we have to defend ourselves against them. I mean, it's where do you put this? And this is this is the only solution I can think of just thus far, and it ties into the whole thing about college applications. If we had an anonymous way, and I have to believe with the technology that we have, that if we put the right minds on this, we can come up with a system, okay, to have a blanket anonymous test, if you will, a check saying, look, and by the way, we already have, I don't know, have you, Ricky, you haven't, but Ethan, do you have a weapon?
Not anymore, I don't.
Okay, but you had a FOID card. Did I hear you?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so listen, in any state, and this is another thing people that throw out there, that you can just walk into a gun show and buy a gun. Negative, Ghost Rider. Okay, you can't. You have to pass up. You have to fill out a sheet of paper. Goes to the FBI. I know I've purchased many weapons myself, and it goes to the FBI background check. It checks for my criminal record. Checks if I, believe it or not, they've actually included if you owe child support.
So they do it right there on the spot.
Right there on the spot.
And before they let you leave the building.
Yes, before they leave. And now it depends. Now look, I've had situations where I walk in and I wait 20 minutes and I get my response. I've had situations where they say, you got to come back in 3 days. We'll call you when it's ready. So we already have a background check. Now, a universal background check, again, let me get back on the question here. If it was anonymous, I'd be completely for it. Okay. But I know this is going to sound like, to those that are not proponents of the 2A, this is going to sound like some far right-wing thing. The government's not supposed to know what weapon I have. They're not. Okay, and there's actual documentation to this as early as 1805, as far as what is acceptable for a citizen to have as far as weaponry. Would you believe that cannons were allowed? Cannons.
Sure.
Yes.
And makes sense.
Cannons. Okay. So when people say, well, you're not allowed to have a nuclear weapon, which, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying anyone should ever be in possession of such a thing, such a disastrous thing. And yes, there are things that we need to address as modernity has happened. But okay, down from there, that's where it gets murky. That's where the discussion happens. That's where the debate is, right? Should I have a machine gun? Should I have a tank? Should I be able to purchase a jet fighter? Well, these are interesting questions that we can talk about, right? But at the very least, I don't need you knowing what weapons I have, because it defeats the purpose.
I don't think I knew that you were that far left wing, bro. Wait, was that left wing or right wing? Was that
right.
Right wing. Yeah, I stay away from both sides of that extreme because they're both problematic for Black people. So
you don't think? So just to be clear, you don't think there should be any type of list anywhere, or you just don't think the government should have that list?
The government should not have a list. It should not have a database of, Angelo Mazza has this artillery. Okay, that defeats the purpose. It really does. if the intention, and it is, and I'll debate anybody on this, and you know what, give me enough time, I'll cite the Federalist Papers, and I'll have the quotation ready for you, given enough time to do it.
And you all can find Angelo on social media at no.
Well, actually, for the record, now that we've been talking, I've been wanting to put together a roundtable on the Second Amendment. How would you like to be one of those people?
I'm in. I'm in. But listen, again, there's common. Again, we all possess common sense. Okay. Look, we don't have a solution at the moment. Okay. Here's what I'm not going to allow. Here's what I'll never stand. Here's what I'll never agree with. I'm not going to agree with a knee-jerk reaction for a very serious thing, that is being our right to defend ourselves against the tyrannical government. I will dedicate time. I will dedicate thought, and I will dedicate, putting myself in discussion, saying, all right, well, what can we come up with? What can we do? Look, we're smart beings, right? We've been able to solve other problems in the world. We just need some time to think about this, put together, like you're saying, put together a round table, something that makes sense and is not going to infringe upon my right and your right to bear arms.
So according to the Second Amendment, slaves should have really had arms, huh?
Yeah, well,
that's another conversation.
Yeah, well,
for another moment.
So that's a can of worms.
Tyrannical government. Slaves.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
I know you're joshing about.
I was making light of that.
Here's the real thing, though. Okay, how easy is it to enslave a people when they're armed?
You're right. You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. That hits the black militia groups that are coming up.
Yeah.
I know we got a few other questions too, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you want to get
what are the reasons you wouldn't pass a background check?
What are the reasons?
Is that specifically, or just in general?
I think just in general.
What reason?
Oh,
say it again, Ethan. Sorry, say it again.
No. What are the reasons you wouldn't pass a background check?
Well, I just kind of went over that. It's the government should not be. Well, for here again, we have background checks. We have them. That's what a lot of people don't understand. Like it's this. Can you sell a gun private sale to somebody without a background check? The answer is yes. Okay. The answer is yes. Okay. But if I walk into any store, any gun store, any gun show, because people talk about the gun show loophole, you get a background check. Okay.
Sorry, you just said it was possible though to buy a gun without a background check. Yes.
If it's person to person, yeah.
So how could that not happen at a gun show by just making it person to person and use that as a loophole?
Well, that's the stipulation that the government puts in place. If you have a business license, and every gun show and person that wants to sell arms at a gun show must actually have a business license to do so. So that's why they're required to do a background check. Now, if it's a person like you and I, like Ricky, if I have an extra, if I have I have a 6R 380 that I want to sell you, and you want to buy it from me, there's no background check needed. Okay. Now keep in mind there's a serial number. What?
Would you agree that is a serious problem?
Well, yeah.
I just thought you looked over like you were going to pick up the gun and show it to me. I just nervous for a minute. He looked over like, say I have this 6R. Like, wait.
Yeah. No, that's no, that wouldn't be here. That's actually in my car. This 380's in the car. The HK 9mm in the nightstand.
All right.
But sorry. Back to your question. I mean, yeah, person-to-person sales are an issue. Yes, I agree. And can we come up with something with that? If you want to talk about, again, like if we get into specifics, if we stop painting with a broad brush, we can get into that. We can get into like, hey, let's not have person-to-person sales. Let's make sure that everybody does at least a standard background check as I walk into a gun show or walk into a gun store and want to purchase a weapon. I have to do that. Well, why is it any different as person-to-person? Again, this is a topic we can talk about. Like these are areas that we need to talk about, if you will. But the problem is that again, people they get so crazy when something happens in society, and it's not that people that espouse my stance on the Second Amendment and our Second Amendment right aren't sympathetic and compassionate to what happens in the media, or excuse me, not in the media, but what happens in the world that the media reports upon. Of course we are, but I'm not going to succumb to a knee-jerk reaction to something, to a tragedy, because your emotions are running high. I'm not going to I'm not giving up my right for your emotion. We can have a rational discourse.
It's trying to improve society and recognize that guns are a real problem
in America.
Guns? Okay. So I don't know if we can go in that direction if you want, but you want to answer some more questions. I can answer that, but
so we'll say that for the roundtable.
Yeah.
Because there was go ahead.
No, just real quick comment from BestName, which I love. Are your cars registered, your loans, your real estate, your address? Yeah. So I'm going to assume I'm with BestName on this, that, the government should have a list of what guns you have.
Okay, fair enough. The only counterpoint I would have to that is you do not have the right to drive. Your right to drive. You don't have the right to own real estate. Well, you have the right to own property. But I get the point. I mean, I understand the gist that this question is going with is these things are regulated. These things are registered. Why isn't, your weapon, right? Right. Would you agree? Like that's what they're trying to get at with that question?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Well,
my immediate response is you do not, driving is a privilege and not a right. I have the right to bear arms, and we can start the conversation there and go from there.
That's actually where when we talk next, that's where it should be, is why do we need a right to bear arms?
Sure.
Because if I could get rid of the Second Amendment, I would in a heartbeat. Again, I'm for responsible gun ownership, not what we currently have. I'm
gonna throw back out there that we'll keep the Second Amendment, at least for the marginalized and oppressed communities of white supremacy. That's how I feel. Maybe we should add that as the amendment, only if you are a part of.
If someone could fact check this, gun shows in Illinois only have to require background checks if over 50 firearms are to be sold.
It does vary by state. I will say this. It doesn't. He's right. It does vary by state. It does.
That's a problem too. Wouldn't you agree?
It does vary by state. Not all the states are the same. To fact check that though, I don't know. I honestly, I didn't purchase my first weapons till I moved to Arizona. So I wouldn't know. I do know in Arizona though. Yeah. So I don't know specifically Illinois law if it's over 50 guns or not. I really don't know. I can't speak to that. So I don't have it all versed.
Well, I would definitely like to continue this conversation sometime, particularly on the Second Amendment. And
yeah, let's do it.
So, Rick, what else did you want to say?
Well, you had one question from someone who watches the show.
It's someone who occasionally watches the show, but I don't know if there's enough time to address it.
Yeah, we'll have to say that for the next one.
I unfortunately am not working. So
Angela wants to continue on. I understand that. I really do. I so do. Angela's going to probably have his own show at one point on YFNA News, it sounds like. So we'll get that working for him too as well. But we do have
Italian to talk. I know it's I saw
that it's Italian side coming out. I say this all the time. The Italian community and the Black community run so parallel in characteristics and in orientation. They're so parallel. I never understood why there was so much headbutting that took place throughout history. But Angela and I have been friends for a good time, and I'm glad we've been able to have this conversation. Yeah. I'll let you and Ethan continue on your Second Amendment conversation on another show. But thank you for speaking about the nuances of racism. I know that you're very vocal on having educated conversations around the nuances. So anything else that you want to add before we wrap up, Angela?
Really quick. Ethan, I'm going to look into that stat you said about Switzerland, because I gotta clarify that threw me off for a loop earlier on in the conversation, because I've read and seen otherwise. So I'm going to look into that, and I want to have a proper answer for you, because that kind of like made me scratch my head for a second there. But anyway, that's it. That's all.
For the people who are watching that wish to get in touch with Angelo to continue the conversation further, he didn't know if the show was going to go well enough to display his Black social media platforms. Angelo, how did the show go? I'm just curious. How did the show go?
I think it went fantastic, and I gotta be honest. This is my first time doing anything like this, and I've always wanted to partake. But I think it went really well. I was a little nervous at first, truth be told. I think that's only natural, but I think it went great. And honestly, if I may just leave everyone with just this last little bit here.
Sure.
Look, if we don't start talking to one another, okay, if we don't have rational discourse, we're headed on a road right now, and I don't have the tinfoil hat on here. Okay, we're heading towards an area that is scary, and I'm being honest. I'm very, very concerned about our country, and we need to have more of this to have an understanding of each other. It's the only way forward, because when words stop, wars start. So,
and that's what we need to stop. So I could go into a rant about this, but I'm not going to. I just wish people would actually do that. Like, I know, to my Democrat friends, I know Republicans drive you nuts. To my Republican friends, I know Democrats drive you nuts. But guess what? We still have to live together in this society. Yes. So we need to find a way to work together, no matter how frustrating it is at times. So, yes, agree with Angelo. Talk that shit out.
Very true.
And also, if you haven't, now's the perfect time to like and subscribe to YFNA News and click the notification bell and turn notifications on for whenever we go live. And if you like what we do and you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/YFNA News or buy us a cup of coffee.com/YFNA News. And it goes to helping improve the quality of the show. One day, we'll be in an actual studio at some point. Hopefully, that would be cool.
It can happen.
In the meantime, we'll use StreamYard from the comfort of our own homes while COVID.
Especially while we're in this quarantine COVID season. Hey, and if you like this content, be sure to check out our sibling show, The 13%, airing here every Monday night at 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time, hosted by the Cynthia, McDonald, and Arthur Ward, where they discuss politics and policies that affect the Black community. Great topics, great conversation, great discussions. Political Perspectives also will be airing every now and then, whenever that gets a consistent run. I can't wait for that one to come back too as well. But so much more content that we're building. So again, make sure that you're, if you find the ability to do it, donate to that Patreon link.
And as long as there's racism to fight,
there'll always be in black and white.
Goodbye, everyone.
Good night, guys.
Thanks, guys.